You know, it is just, it's wild to think about. You can have a genius level IQ, work as a senior executive at some top tier Wall Street investment firm, and still go completely bankrupt.
Oh, absolutely. It happens way more often than people think.
Right. And meanwhile, a school janitor who, like, barely passed high school and never earned more than minimum wage can somehow retire with $8 million in the bank. I mean, how does that even make sense?
Well, if you look at money purely as numbers on a spreadsheet, it really doesn't.
Exactly. But we have been lying to ourselves for decades about what money actually is.
Yeah, we are conditioned from a very young age to believe that personal finance is, a math problem.
Right. Like it's all about formulas.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We're taught that building wealth is about memorizing compound interest models or uh, reading stock charts. But the reality is that the financial world is just littered with absolute mathematical geniuses who lose everything.
Because they panic during a recession.
Precisely.
So today we are doing a deep dive into excerpts from the Behavioral Blueprint for Financial Freedom.
Yes, which is centered around the work of Morgan Housel, the award-winning financial writer.
And I want to be clear right up front, the mission of this deep dive isn't to give you a stock picking strategy or walk you through some complicated Excel tutorial.
Thank goodness, because that would be incredibly dry.
Seriously. No, instead, we are exploring the psychology of money today. We want to uncover how your behavior, your mindset, and, your deeply ingrained emotional patterns actually dictate your financial destiny.
That is the real core of it.
Okay, let's unpack this because if money isn't a math problem, what exactly is happening in our brains when we deal with it?
Well, we are basically navigating a massive emotional minefield.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. To understand how to actually build wealth, you have to completely dismantle the idea that intelligence is the deciding factor.
Right.
Your behavior matters so much more than your brilliance, because money triggers our most intense, primal psychological states.
Like what kind of states?
We're talking about deep-seated fear, greed, impatience, and honestly, profound insecurity.
That makes total sense.
Right. You can have the most mathematically perfect investment portfolio in the world, but if your emotional control is weak, you will sabotage it the moment things get scary.
It is kind of like treating personal finance like it's purely a math equation, is like treating a diet like it's purely a calorie counting exercise.
Oh, that is a perfect analogy.
Right, because we all know the math of a diet. We know an apple is biologically better for us than a chocolate frosted donut.
The math is undisputed there.
Exactly. The problem usually isn't that we don't know the calorie count or that we lack information. The problem is that we eat the donut anyway because, I don't know, our boss yelled at us.
Or we only slept 4 hours.
Yes. Or we want to celebrate a win. The logic just goes completely out the window the second the emotional pressure cooker turns on.
And the physiological mechanism behind that is exactly why emotional intelligence functions as your ultimate financial superpower.
Wait, physiological, like real physical changes.
Completely. When you are stressed, say, when you open your retirement account and see it has dropped by 20% because the global market took a hit, your brain literally changes.
Wow.
Yeah, your amygdala, which is the fear center of the brain, just floods your system with cortisol.
So you are basically in fight or flight mode.
Exactly. It essentially hijacks your prefrontal cortex. And that is the part of your brain responsible for logical, long-term planning.
Right, so the math part of your brain just shuts off.
Yes, the math is telling you, historically markets recover, just hold steady. But your hijacked brain is screaming, we are under threat, sell everything and run to safety.
Because at the end of the day, you are the one sitting at the computer pressing the buy or sell button.
Exactly.
You are the one standing at the register swiping the credit card. The spreadsheet isn't making the decision for you.
It isn't.
Eek.
And what's fascinating here is that the people who end up with vastly different financial outcomes over a 20-year period, they aren't separated by their salaries. They are separated by their emotional regulation. The text makes a profound case that financial peace fundamentally derives from emotional peace.
That is a really powerful way to frame it.
It really is. The ability to just sit on your hands and do absolutely nothing when the market is crashing, or the ability to ignore the fear of missing out when all your friends are getting rich on some trendy new cryptocurrency, that psychological restraint outranks any Ivy League finance degree.
But wait, if the whole point is restraint, what are we even doing?
What do you mean?
Well, isn't the point of working grueling 60-hour weeks and climbing the corporate ladder to finally be able to buy the nice things?
I see where you're going.
I mean, we want the luxury car, the sprawling house, the designer clothes. Isn't displaying the fruits of your labor the actual definition of
Yeah, it
success?
is definitely what we are taught.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the source material explicitly attacks this entire premise of visible success.
It completely flips the paradigm. It exposes this really stark difference between being rich and being wealthy.
Which we usually just use interchangeably, right?
We do, all the time in everyday conversation.
Yeah.
But they describe entirely different psychological and financial realities.
Okay, break that down for me.
So rich means you have current income to spend today. It is highly visible. Society trains us to look for visual cues of success.
Like the cars and the houses.
Right. When you see someone driving a $100,000 sports car, your brain just assumes, wow, they are doing incredible.
Obviously, yeah.
But the only objective mathematical truth you know about their financial situation is that they have $100,000 less than they did before they bought the car.
Oh, wow. That's literally true.
Or far more likely, they are drowning in a massive amount of high-interest debt to finance that illusion.
So rich is loud. Rich is what the algorithm feeds us on social media, the private jets, the champagne, the massive penthouses.
It's a performance.
Exactly, it's performative.
Wealth, on the other hand, is completely invisible.
Invisible.
Yes, wealth is literally the money you do not spend.
Which is so hard to conceptualize.
It is. It's the investment portfolio sitting quietly in the background.
Yeah.
Or, the unspent savings account.
Right.
It is having the restraint to drive a 10-year-old sedan, even though you could easily afford the brand new luxury SUV. Building wealth is inherently anti-dopamine.
Anti-dopamine, that makes total sense.
Right. Because when you buy the sports car, your brain gives you a massive hit of dopamine from the social validation and the thrill of the purchase.
People look at you at the stoplight.
Exactly. But when you transfer $500 into an index fund, nobody claps for you.
Yeah, there is no parade for a responsible index fund deposit.
There is no immediate chemical reward. You have to be secure enough in yourself to forego the immediate visible status for something much more valuable later on.
But then what are we actually buying with that invisible money? Because if it just sits in an account until I die, that sounds pretty miserable.
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, you are actually buying autonomy. Yes. This fundamentally redefines the entire concept of saving. Traditionally, financial advisors tell you to, save for a rainy day.
Right, the emergency fund.
Exactly. You put money away so that if your water heater explodes or your roof leaks, you aren't ruined. And that is true, but it's a very defensive mindset.
Okay, so what is the alternative?
The source material argues that savings should be viewed offensively. Saving isn't just about preparing for a broken-down car. It is about buying flexibility. You are stockpiling freedom.
Stockpiling freedom. That reframing changes everything about how it feels to save.
It really is.
Instead of feeling like I'm restricting myself by, not buying the expensive shoes, I'm actually buying my own future freedom.
Precisely. When you hold on to your money, you are purchasing the freedom to pivot.
Give me an example of that.
Say you burn out in your career 5 years from now. A robust savings account gives you the power to quit and take 6 months to find a job you actually love.
That is huge.
It gives you the ability to take a massive risk on a startup idea without terrifying your family. Or it gives you the leverage to walk into a toxic boss's office and say, I quit, without having a panic attack about next month's rent.
Because unspent money buys options.
And options create profound personal power. Having control over your own time and your own stress levels is the ultimate luxury. And frankly, you cannot buy that at a car dealership.
So the goal is to stockpile freedom, which is invisible and sits somewhere in the future.
Yes.
But that introduces a really brutal psychological friction, right?
Oh, so?
Well, how do we practically build this invisible wealth without losing our minds to impatience? I mean, we live in an on-demand world.
Oh, totally.
If a web page takes more than 3 seconds to load, we close the tab. If a package isn't delivered to my door in 48 hours, I'm genuinely annoyed.
We all are.
So how do we build something that requires literally decades of waiting?
Well, we are basically fighting our own evolutionary programming.
Really? Evolution is working against us here.
Oh, absolutely. The human brain evolved to survive the immediate present. If you were a hunter-gatherer, you didn't save calories for 30 years.
Right, you ate the berries immediately.
Exactly, because you might not survive the winter. Our brains are wired for linear, immediate cause and effect. But money, specifically the mechanics of long-term thinking and compounding, operates on an exponential curve.
Which our brains just don't get.
It is a mathematical reality that our brains literally cannot intuitively grasp.
You know, compounding is one of those concepts that everyone just sort of nods along to at dinner parties.
Right. Ah, yes, compound interest.
Yeah, but very few people truly internalize how bizarre it is. It's almost like learning a new language or picking up the guitar.
That's a really good comparison.
In those early days, it is just agonizingly slow.
Yeah.
Your fingers are bleeding on the frets. You can only play 3 clumsy chords, and honestly, it sounds awful.
And you just want to quit.
Exactly. You look at a professional musician and think, well, I'll never get there. This is totally useless.
All right.
But if you just keep adding one tiny chord at a time, eventually the muscle memory takes over, the chords combine, and suddenly you are effortlessly playing a full symphony. So what does this all mean for our daily financial choices? How do we endure the bleeding fingers phase of saving money?
By truly understanding the nature of an exponential curve, compounding isn't just a spreadsheet formula, it is a life philosophy.
A life philosophy.
Yes. The source material emphasizes that compounding is like an iceberg.
Okay.
For the first 10, 15, or even 20 years, 90% of the growth is entirely invisible. It is buried beneath the surface.
So you don't even see it happening.
Not really. You are putting away $200 a month, and it feels like you are shoveling sand into the ocean.
Which is incredibly demoralizing.
It is. But you have to endure that agonizingly slow beginning because the math eventually hits an inflection point. The money literally starts making its own money.
Right.
But the absolute golden rule of compounding is that it only works if you do not interrupt it unnecessarily.
Which brings us right back to emotional regulation. Because the urge to interrupt it is usually driven by panic or boredom.
Mostly panic, yes. And that is exactly why long-term thinking is the antidote to the emotional hijacks we discussed earlier.
How does that work?
When you force your brain to adopt a time horizon of 30 years, a bad week in the stock market doesn't look like a tiger attacking you anymore.
It's just a tiny blip on a massive radar.
Precisely. You stop reacting emotionally to the 24-hour news cycle and you start acting intentionally. The modern world heavily rewards speed and immediate action, but wealth.
Wealth disproportionately rewards patience.
Exactly. It rewards patience and inaction. Honestly, the hardest financial skill is learning how to just stand there and do absolutely nothing.
But wait, if compounding is all about this infinite snowball rolling down a mountain, just getting bigger and bigger, when do you stop?
Now that is the real issue.
Right, because human nature seems uniquely terrible at pumping the brakes. If the goal is just more, how do you know when you've actually won the game?
You've just identified the ultimate psychological trap. If you don't define where the finish line is, you will literally keep running until your heart gives out.
Wow.
The sources identify this endless pursuit of more as one of the most critical threats to both financial and mental peace. We are terrified of defining the concept of enough.
Enough sounds so simple, but it has to be the hardest thing in the world to practice. Because, you know, we don't assess our lives in a vacuum.
We assess our lives by looking over the fence at our neighbors.
Yes, we assess status relatively.
And this is another evolutionary holdover. In a tribe, your rank determined your access to food and mates.
So is life or death.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Today, that translates into shifting goalposts. You make $100,000 a year, which let's say was your absolute dream 5 years ago.
You felt like you made it.
Right. But now you move to a nicer neighborhood, and suddenly your new neighbor makes $200,000 and drives a Porsche.
And instantly you feel poor again.
Your brain immediately resets your baseline to 0, and you feel inadequate. If your definition of success is based on comparing yourself to others, you are playing a rigged game that mathematically cannot be won.
Because there will always be someone with a bigger boat.
Always. A higher valuation or a louder social media presence.
And the danger isn't just, you know, feeling sad about it. The danger is that the feeling of inadequacy drives you to do incredibly stupid things with your money.
Exactly. This raises an important question, one that you really must sit down and answer for yourself before you make another financial decision.
What's the question?
What does financial freedom mean to you? Strip away your parents' expectations, your coworkers' judgments, and the algorithm's influence. What is actually enough to live a peaceful, autonomous life?
Because if you don't know, you'll never stop.
Right. The absolute tragedy of modern finance is watching people who already have enough People who have plenty of wealth to live a great life risk everything they have and need to chase money they don't have and don't need.
And they do it entirely to feed their ego.
Yes, they risk their actual freedom to buy the illusion of status.
You see it all the time with white-collar crime or people over-leveraging themselves in massive real estate gambles.
All the time.
But aren't we assuming a bit too much control here?
How do you mean?
Well, we talk about defining enough and building the snowball as if we are the masters of the universe.
Right.
Like how much of this entire equation is just totally out of our hands?
That is the reality check that forces humility back into the conversation. The text makes a really profound point about luck and risk.
Because we don't like talking about luck.
Not at all. As human beings, we desperately want to believe the world is a pure meritocracy. We want to believe that if we do A, B, and C, we are absolutely guaranteed result D.
Yeah, when we look at massively successful people, we tend to attribute 100% of their wealth to their infallible genius and their relentless grind.
Because admitting that luck played a role is actually terrifying.
It means we aren't totally in control of the steering wheel.
Exactly. But luck and risk are just two sides of the exact same coin. It's the reality that outcomes are driven by forces far larger than your individual effort.
So timing is a factor.
Timing matters immensely. If you graduated from college in 2008, right during the global financial crisis, your economic trajectory looks drastically different than someone with the exact same degree and work ethic who graduated in the booming market of 1998.
So true.
Some people succeed wildly simply because they were standing in the right place at the right time with the right idea.
And the brutal flip side of that coin is that some people fail despite doing absolutely everything right.
Yes, they work 80 hours a week, they save diligently, they regulate their emotions, they define enough.
And then a totally unpredictable medical emergency happens.
Or a global pandemic or an economic crash wipes out their entire portfolio.
Internalizing the role of luck and risk completely changes how you view yourself and others, doesn't it?
It really does.
Yeah.
If you realize that your own financial success isn't purely the result of your singular genius, it keeps you grounded.
It prevents that arrogance that usually precedes a massive financial mistake.
Exactly. And equally importantly, if you realize that someone else's financial struggle isn't necessarily due to laziness or foolishness, it fosters deep empathy.
Right. It strips away the harsh, judgmental lens we so often apply to poverty or financial ruin.
Recognizing the role of luck allows you to forgive yourself for your failures and remain deeply grateful for your successes.
So, if we pull all of these threads together, the behavioral blueprint we've been unpacking today isn't really a book about money at all, is it?
Not fundamentally, no.
It is a mirror. It is a psychological assessment of how we handle fear, how we battle our own egos, and how we resist the evolutionary urge to consume everything right now.
That is beautifully put. Wealth is ultimately a measure of your psychological discipline. The central thesis we keep returning to is that your habits will always outlast your intelligence. Emotional intelligence. You have the ability to calm your amygdala, to stop comparing yourself to your neighbor, and to endure those invisible decades of compounding. It proves infinitely more valuable over a lifetime than raw financial intellect.
So true wealth isn't the loudest car on the street.
No, true wealth is the quiet freedom to wake up every morning and know that you own your own time.
Which brings us to the call to action for everyone listening right now. The directives from the sources are incredibly clear, and honestly, they have nothing to do with timing the market.
They don't.
Start today, no matter where you are starting from. Even if it's $10 a week, just start the compounding process.
Exactly. Stretch your time horizon. Stop thinking about next month and start thinking about the next 3 decades.
Your financial future isn't determined by the size of your current paycheck. It is determined by your choices, your emotional resilience, and your ability to define your own finish line.
You really don't need an Ivy League degree to achieve financial peace. You just need the clarity to define what enough means for your own life.
And the quiet discipline to stay the course while everyone around you is panicking.
Let the math of compounding do the heavy lifting while you focus on mastering your own mind.
Absolutely. As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over as you go out into the world today.
I love this part.
We spent a lot of time discussing how true, autonomous wealth is completely invisible. It is defined entirely by the cars you do not buy, the upgrades you do not make, and the money you do not spend.
Right.
So the next time you find yourself scrolling through social media or driving through a wealthy neighborhood, feeling that familiar pang of envy at the massive houses and the luxury brands, just stop and ask yourself, Are you actually looking at wealth?
Mm.
Or are you just looking at a very loud, very expensive display of someone else's financial vulnerability?